So I'm really happy to be back here with you and to continue our lecture on, from counterculture to circular economy about the Silicon Valley. We have some new guests, so welcome to them. And we will start this session with a short presentation from Tino Go. Tino has a background in international finance and is now the CEO and founder of Baru. Our startup is going to tell you more about. Maybe to understand, one of our idea here was really to give you kind of a case, like a study case, to understand what does it mean to be an entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley, and what are his perspective and his link to circular economy, and maybe also to counterculture. So, Tino, I'm sorry, I guess the floor is yours. We're very looking forward to him.
Yeah, thank you. I founded this company based on a number of principles. It was a few insights that led to the idea that we can deglobalize manufacturing supply chains. And so what we're doing, hang on one second. So what we're doing because it's hard to reuse garbage, we're avoiding garbage. And so we all know this diagram of the circular economy. You start with raw materials, you design, you produce, and you distribute, et cetera, and you try to recycle what you can out of what remains at the end of life. And so the goal is to minimize waste, to minimize material usage, to minimize effort, to maximize value. But however, in the furniture world, circularity fails because it's hard to reuse garbage. The solution is to use quality materials and create hyperlocal circular supply chains. So the way Baru's approaching it is we're starting at the end. We look at the percentage extractable, the economic value that we're creating, the environmental effect, the recycling effort that will be needed, and the net reuse and value recaptured. By starting at the end, we can also then look at collection methods, because what we're doing is we're building hyper-local supply chains. So we can look at the collection methods required, the regional infrastructure that exists, the sorting efficiency, and working our way back through the product, backwards through the product life cycle. We can look at things like we can plan for repairability. We can look at what existing and new services are required in a region, and also estimate the economic yield out of our process. That goes back to distribution. We can consider during the design process the CO2 scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We can consider packaging minimization by being hyperlocal. That inherently reduces packaging. And then we can also calculate the indirect costs and the waste. That goes back up to production, and then the remanufacturing of all of the net products that come out of the recycling process. So the whole point is engineer for the locality, optimize for the useful life, with a consideration of triple bottom line considerations. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is always maximize pleasure, minimize waste, and plan for carbon offsets. And so that is what we're doing. We're converting waste into assets. So let me show you the waste that we're converting in the furniture industry and into assets. In the US, the furniture industry, furniture and cabinetry, it's a $35 billion annual business. $15 billion of that is wasted on shipping and handling. We're taking that $15 billion of wasted shipping and handling costs and converting it into assets by manufacturing near the customer. And there's an industry problem also of globalization in the US has led to 6 million permanently displaced workers. Baru is taking the approach that those workers are actually an asset. What we're doing is we're taking advantage of idle robotics. There are about 4,000 of these machines in the US and Canada, and on average, they're only in use 2 hours a day. These high capital costs, high fixed costs, highly underused machines lead to lost revenue and lost profits for those manufacturers. But for Baru, as a network of idle machines, that lost time, that non-productive time is an asset. And what we're solving is a customer problem that 56% of surveyed shoppers experience, where when they're buying furniture or cabinetry for their home, they can't find it in this material, size, color, and other specs. And then custom orders are expensive and they take a long time to deliver. So our solution is to reorganize all those wasted resources and into a new economic system and a new supply chain. We're arbitraging the shipping costs. We're redeploying hometown labor as we leverage these idle robotics. And because we're local, we can also deliver custom products. So we have a patent process, our process converts what is in a buyer's imagination. If they're using our augmented reality app, it converts what is in their imagination. They can configure it directly in augmented reality. We convert that into machine instructions for a local machine to produce. It's a completely different approach to manufacturing and supply chains. We're taking a traditional global supply chain that takes 18 months and is all geared around minimization of inventory risk. And we've converted it into a customer to manufacturer direct manufacturing process. We convert what's in the buyer's desire into machine instructions for on-demand manufacturing. And that reduces that 18-month cycle to 2 weeks at 40% less cost structure. There are so many of these machines, we can be less than 1 hour drive away from 250 million Americans. And so this is in the top 100 metro areas. And yeah, so Baru, we just started a couple of years ago, but we're currently in 29 metro areas with 100 million customers, homes and businesses within our drive. And so what we've done is we've taken what's typically a global manufacturing supply chain that produces immense amounts of inventory. Much of that inventory will need to be thrown away because it's not sold, and those warehouses need to be cleared out for the next year's collection. And so we're taking that principle and we're eliminating that. We don't create inventory. We only sell the custom products that every customer wants. And that creates a more economically and environmentally efficient system of manufacturing. As a matter of fact, as we've taken a global supply chain and reduced it down to hometown ecosystems, we're actually supporting 6 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals purely as a byproduct of our operations. So we're reshoring manufacturing, creating decent work and economic growth. Our patented innovation and also the marketplace innovation, this creating virtual factories out of idle machines, is actually furthering industry innovation and optimizing the use of existing infrastructure. We're creating high-wage factory jobs, reducing inequalities. We have no inventory to landfill, so we're creating a more sustainable city and community. And then we're producing actually better quality products for every price point that we're targeting. And then we've reduced our climate effect to a hometown process, but we also plant enough trees for every product that we sell to completely eliminate our carbon footprint within 3 years. So it's a completely different approach. We simply avoid making garbage. And that new approach to manufacturing is what causes circularity from our viewpoint.
Thank you so much, Tino. So to summarize, your approach would be, if I want to buy a new table, I actually take my phone and then it get actually manufactured where I live, right?
Yeah, so the augmented reality app where we took offline because not many people were using it. Currently, you can go to our website, choose any given product, and that product is available in between 10,000 and 100,000 sizes, and dozens of materials and colors. So that allows you to you can choose what you like, and then you can customize it for your needs and desires.
Mm-hmm. And what happens if it doesn't fit, or if you don't like it?
We take it back.
You take it back? Okay. Thank you so much. I was thinking maybe for engineers, in the class, it was interesting to understand how the complete process was working. We will move to a discussion and Q&A later, but now let's hear Faith. Faith Legendre is an advisor in circular economy and on innovation with the focus on consumer packaging, fashion, mobility, and tech. So we're going to have a little bit more of meta understanding and about the future in different industries. You're going to present us, I think, a couple of projects where you worked on. So thank you very much for joining us, Faith. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Tino for creating the future today. This is what's needed with super hyper local supply chains, right? That's what's really, it's the smaller tribes or what works, right? And empowering local communities. I just love that whole model. It's something years ago that I used to talk about all the time, and I would be at conferences and people would look at me like I have 3 heads, and I'm like, that's never going to work. So it's so nice to see you've done it. Thank you. I have a presentation, so let me just share my screen here, get my deck up here for you guys. Just some, I'm not as great as a visual designer as the last 2 presenters. So my dad was an artist and a great artist, but I didn't seem to inherit those type of visual genes. I apologize in advance there. So let me share this and go into presentation mode here. Oops, I'm too far ahead here. There it goes. Okay, so circular economy, current models. I'm going to go in different places. Well, first, let me check to make sure. Can you see the blue slide? Yes. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Emilia. Since a very young age, circa around the 1980s, have been a little bit obsessed with trash or what people think is trash. This was me in 8th grade back in the 80s and back in New Hampshire, where I did my science fair project around who will take out the trash. And I talked about how they have these landfills and how the landfills are emitting carbon emissions, and how we needed to recycle and how we could maybe make it into other things. I remember taking some trash and from our house and I wore it, definitely talking about counterculture. I was counterculture in New Hampshire at the time with the local judges who were just the parents, and they're like, I just don't get it. Like, we just put it in the ground and it decomposes, and why do we need to care? And well, fast forward many years later, many decades, and I was working at Cisco Systems, speaking of Silicon Valley. And I started to talk about circular economy, and they said, oh, it just so happens we're one of the founding funding partners of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And so I said, oh, this is interesting. So this is good. And so I started to submit some innovations around how we could use tech for good and how we could use that tech to enable circular systems. So I interviewed over 2,000 people around the globe in different businesses and learned about what they were thinking about around circularity. I left Cisco back in July of 2020 and have been working with various startups to some nonprofits around circular projects. I love prototyping. I love design thinking. I love just trying things out. These models that I'm going to share with you, they are far from perfect. This is just a beginning and a start. So what is circular economy for me? So for me, like Tino mentioned, it's designing it right from the start. They not only thought about designing the furniture and how they could design it better and how they could make sure that they're keeping it in the loop, but they thought about the local communities. They thought about the excess machines. So design really encompasses all those things. It's not just the single product, but where are you going to design it? How is it going to affect that community? How are you going? What are your materials? I found it interesting. I'm in a fashion group, and there was a woman in there, and she'd been in fashion for a long time. And she said, I took a tour to over in Asia, and I was looking outside of the factory, and the water in the lake was purple. And she said to the manager, "Why is it purple?" He says, "Oh, don't worry. When we make 15 million green bras in size B tomorrow, it'll be green." And it was her seminal moment where she thought, wow, this is not right. So when you think about design, you have to also think about, how are you impacting the environment and how are you going to keep it in the loop? And at the end of the presentation, stay tuned because I want to talk a little bit about, just touch very briefly on this concept of regeneration. So I'm helping out a group called the Open Sustainability Collaborative. And we partner with local innovators that are doing really neat circular things to help them scale. Right now, we have an innovator, Gabby, and she's with Upcycle Project, and she's collected 3 tons of used hotel linens in her own little electric car. And you'd be surprised how many hotel linens get thrown away from all of these hotels and cruise ships and bars and gyms and schools. And I really like what she's doing because many textile pilots are trying to tackle multiple inputs. So one of my friends from the VF Corporation back when he was there at Sustainably said, Faith, it's really hard because we don't know how that textile was made. Like this picture, do you know how that pink fabric was made? Do you know how that, multicolored blue and red fabric was made? Is it a plastic polymer where cotton was wound around it? How is it wound around it? That makes for really hard disassemble and upcycling. And there's chemical separation, and there's companies doing that like Worn Again, where they're starting in their factory in Switzerland, where they separate out the plastic from the material like cotton and linen, and so that those pelletized plastic can actually be reused for something else. I like this method because I think about interconnected loops. A lot of people are thinking about, you got to close the loop. It's got to be this to this. And textile to textile is really the goal. Closed loops do work well, but we're just starting out. And so maybe how about some interconnected loops? So maybe you can reuse those pellets for something else. Maybe it's for the patches that people wear for diabetes, like Insulet or something. So thinking about those, I'm really fascinated by how many interconnected loops that we can create because that's what nature does. Nature creates these amazing interconnected loops, right? When you just dig down deep at a farm, and I work with a local farm here, and I see all the white threads kind of running through, and they're mycelium, and it's like the fascia in our veins, and it's carrying all the nutrients and the water. And so the world is truly connected and we are truly connected. So thinking about from biomimicry perspective, how do we create these interconnected loops and keep things upcycled? Downcycling isn't the best way. What happens now with textiles is people rag them and then they turn them into these rags, and the rags are used once and they're thrown away. Again, it's just another avenue, downcycling to landfill and incineration. So I really like what Gabby's doing because she is thinking about this, and her project is honing in on a very simple textile, but a very ubiquitous textile. It's everywhere. As we were saying, in cruise ships and hotels and gyms. So she has a lot of 100% cotton, which is good because it can be upcycled into other things. And then some of the towels have a 80-20 cotton poly mix, but they're not super complex. So it's a start towards a great solution to start to handle these textiles. Textiles also, they gum up the recycling plants because they get caught in the rollers. They cause fires. They're also heavy to lug, especially when they get wet. And when they're landfilled, they don't compress down that well. Waste management, all these companies that do waste, they don't like textiles. They don't want it in their landfill. So we're all looking for solutions on creating circularity around this. And Gabby's done some really cool things, like she's taken the old dirty towels and sanitized them and refashioned them into bags that were sold in the hotel shop. And those are bags that people keep for a long time, unlike a towel. So she's really thinking about the upcycling component of this. Something else I did back in the past here is I worked with a couple of colleagues and we talked about, and this is a defensive publication, and I can share it in the chat at the end of our presentation, the link to it. I had put together a paper with my colleagues around using technology to connect these interconnected loops, because what's waste for one organization might be inputs for another. For example, at Ford, believe it or not, in the cars, there's 9 different waste products from the food industry: coffee beans, agave from tequila, scraps. There's ketchup, the tomato rinds and whatnot. That's actually made into a liner in the back of the car, and into lights in the front. So feel free to read this paper if you'd like to kind of understand, and think about where you could have some interconnected loops with some of the different things that you're working on. Again, like I said, I'm a big fan of design thinking through and prototyping. And so back a couple years in Houston, Texas, I grabbed some existing space. Tino, you'll like this, in like a distribution facility. And instead of using a regular center, and they said, "Oh, that's sure, it's great. You're welcome to use this space." And I put together with my colleagues what it would look like to have the return center of the future, where things are constantly in circulation, whether it's a refill, or it's a piece of clothing, or you're getting, somebody didn't like that piece of furniture and you're getting it back and you're putting it back into the system, into use. That's our goal, is to kind of keep things in these wheels and moving, interconnected. And fast forward again from this, that was one of the things that we talked about, was that connectedness. So recently, you might have seen the laws, and I agree with what Fred was saying. We do need a lot of public policy. I'm a big fan of EPR laws, extended producer responsibility, which more are happening in Europe, but there's 14 states that have them in the US. And they're embarking upon these laws, such as the no plastic bag policy. However, if you don't think through that system and you don't talk to people and listen to the community, you get this on the left for this, lots of reusable bags, and you forget when you go to the store. And so there's a company in Silicon Valley called 99 Bridges that's working on and you'll see it in some of the places there, and then you'll also see it soon over in Europe, where you can scan your phone, it's tied to you, it knows it's you, you get a sanitized reusable bag, you use it in the store, you go home, you can bring it back, you can drop it off. Also reminders that when you're located near the store or on your way, remind you to bring your bag back. So thinking through the whole behavioral system with that too is important. You want to make it smart and a delightful experience. There's all these things around circular economy. And it's funny because one of my friends says, oh, that's great for other countries, but in the US, because they just, if you just implement something, they just follow through. But in the US, they just fight everything. So they said, we have to make this a delightful experience for people. And so tied into this system, it's interconnected again. So it's not just one store doing this. It's Target, it's Walgreens, it's CVS, it's the multiple stores. And so you can use that bag at those multiple stores, and you have pickup and drop off of that bag at those multiple stores. So they're working together, which is really nice. And you get rewards for that. And it shows you how much carbon. So there's a game element in it. So it helps reinforce that good behavior. The other system I really like is Grammo, which is from Chile, and this is where the piece about economics comes into play. So when you have to go to the store and you have to buy a large amount, you have to have a certain amount of money to buy that large amount. So what this does is it disadvantages people that that live day to day. That 70% of the world lives off of $10 a day or less. So what happened is in many countries, they started to create these little sachets with just one or two uses. But if you look at the unit pricing on the amount of liquid or ingredients in that sachet, it's like 3 to 4 times what's in the larger container. So again, this is just economically disadvantaging people that live day to day. And so what I like what Grammo did, because these are solar powered electric vehicles that come to the apartment buildings where people are. And then they just on their phone, they order just the amount they need. This is what's wrong with society is we are just doing this spray and pray approach. We just keep producing and all of these things. And then like the Costco's of the world and whatnot, you just buy so much, right, to get your price point down, but then you end up not even using it. And again, it's just not economically equitable for everybody. So you can go here and you can bring your container and you fill up. If you only want 25 cents worth, you can just get 25 cents worth. And that is just so great in the same container. Right? So you're using that container for decades instead of one use, that single use, and just throwing it away. So this will reduce the amount of plastics and packaging in our environment. And it also reduce our carbon emission because all of these packages are made from virgin plastic. And virgin plastic is made from fracking and fossil fuels. The United States is one of the biggest producers of fracking and fossil fuels. And so we need to shut off that faucet, right? And so we need to create these new systems with refill. The other one on the left you see here is actually in Europe. It's called MIWA. And it's a system where you bring your same container. And again, you order just the amount. And it's so smart, just like the Grammo one. It just fills up the amount of lentils or beans or whatever that you needed instead of having to buy. I have so many packages of things that are, half beans left over and half, and I'm trying to think about recipes and figure out that would be a great business as well. I'll give you a tip is if we could scan the amount that's in our cabinets and refrigerators and recommend a recipe that would use up the items. I highly recommend doing that because you get a lot of refrigerator companies, buying that, and kitchen, probably IKEA would get in on that. So there's a little business tip and idea for you. So it's interesting to look at these models because they were looking at economics for local communities in addition to helping the environment. From a fashion perspective, I really like what Donna Inc is doing. She created D-Sphere, and so she's using what's in your closet. So you can send the existing t-shirts, jeans material, and she uses dead stock for the outside of the jacket, and sews in and uses local designers. So you're not going to get something from another country if you're living in a different country. So she uses local designers, and there's so many great fashion local designers, and you can put together the pieces, or you can use a designer to help you online put together those pieces. And then you can ask, talking about social, you can ask people, do you like this? And they can say no, or I have a t-shirt I can give you that would go perfect in the middle that's used and old and I'm not wearing it anymore. So using existing fabrics, using existing material, we have enough textiles in the world to clothe everybody for decades to come. We do not need to create any more clothing out of new virgin materials. In fact, most fabrics, again, talking about the fracking and the emissions, most fabrics are made from plastics. About some brands have about 97% of their fabrics are plastic. So not a good thing, because when we wash them, they shed, they go into our waterways. As you know, all of our rainwater has PFAS in it right now. So you got to think about those things, right? So we're thinking about materials that are, speaking of materials that are more regenerative, there's a circular fashion group that I'm a part of, and they do pre-competitive meeting of brands. And so that's something that you'll see more in the future. A lot of people want to get together for good, even if they are business competitors. And the last thing I want to talk about is, again, that regeneration. So this is you'll hear Starbucks said it. They said, oh, we don't only want to be a net neutral company, we want to be a regenerative company. Right? So we want to give back to the environment. I thought it was interesting. I found this quote: U.S. consumers want companies to go well beyond sustainability and do more good to the planet. According to a study by Regen Friends, nearly 80% of U.S. consumers prefer regenerative brands to sustainable brands. They find the term sustainable too passive. And so some of the companies like Bezos there in Switzerland, which I think is great, and the female scientist in Barcelona that works for Bezos, looking at seaweed for packaging and compostability. This is an interesting woman. You can take the bras and panties that she makes and you can put them in a worm farm, and they will go back in to help the environment. My red little marker there is off a little bit, but I did outlined compost. You'll see more of this coming in the future. And I think, like I was saying earlier, the future is biological, it is regenerative. So how might we not only do less bad, how might we do more good to put nutrients back in our environment that are needed, and make things out of things that will help feed our soils? Because in about 58 more years, I believe it is, we'll be out of all nutrient, really rich, arable soil to grow food. And if we don't have food, well, that's a big problem. So all of it is interconnected, from what we wear, from the packaging that we fill our ingredients with, the containers, to what we eat. It's all truly connected in our system. So it was such an honor to present to all of you today, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Faye. Thank you for sharing this interesting project with us. I would encourage everyone to ask questions if you want to make remarks. So please raise your hands, or you can post the question in the chat. I will also invite you to turn your camera on while you're asking the question, so that we can see you. As people are thinking about their first questions, maybe I want to make the link to the lecture that we have before. I was wondering, to both of you, in your personal journey, what would you say was there an influence that you could feel about, the country culture, what we've heard about the communalist perspective or about the new left? Is this something that you kind of felt shaped a little bit your journey as an entrepreneur? Tino, I don't know if you want to start on this one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely. I've always, I've been fairly rebellious all my life, and but our backgrounds mold who we are, right? I've spent a lot of time outside, a lot of mountaineering, a lot of mountain biking, and that has been really formative in how I consider nature. And I've seen glaciers in France shrink over the course of my lifetime, and so when I came up with the idea of eliminating global mass production, not only did it sound like a fun project, but it was it has the potential of changing industry altogether in every category where there's enough freight and cost arbitrage. And so yeah, but ultimately, even we all have choices when we do things. So I can choose to profit maximize. I can choose to also consider ESG principles and impact principles. And because of who I am and because of where I come from, I'm selecting a path that also considers social benefit, other impacts, not just monetary. And there's a logic behind that too, because I think the public is ready to hear this message, and so there's some marketing logic behind it too.
Thank you. How's it for you, Fred?
I feel the same way as Tino. I think there was a book now, First Break All the Rules. I think that's been me. And it's interesting that I found it so fascinating what Fred said, because it was like more people like them. I didn't grow up very privileged, but I got into a lot of privileged groups. And I just remember being in those privileged groups, being in those rooms and saying, why can't we invite in these other people? And getting some of that pushback that Fred talked about. That was a point in his lecture that I really resonated with me. And it's something that I feel really strongly about. I think that, there's innovation in every mind, and I think we're missing out on opportunities if we don't go out into our communities and speak to people that have different economic backgrounds, different education, different perspectives. And so it's something that I've really gotten behind. There's a couple things that a few of us that talk about these types of things worked on, and we said, well, what would it look like if we left our seat and said on board? So I recently left a board and said, please fill this with someone that is not like me. And there were others. This is the first speaking engagement actually I've taken in a little bit, because I'm really passionate about education. But the other speaking engagements that are on the larger scale, I've given up and sent LinkedIn links to the organizers and said, please give an opportunity for these people to speak, because they want to and they need a voice. And also what we do is we help coach those people, because it's not just about like giving the voice, like Fred said. It's about helping lift up others.
Thank you. Do you want to maybe continue, because we do have a question for you in the chat, or maybe a comment from Mary. I wonder how data and digitalization might help with this issue you mentioned at the end phase about food production and the potential for shortage, and the link with the initiative regarding waste. Do you have an insight on this?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Larry's back with us, so this is great. We're just reading your question. So
yeah, Mary, thank you for your question. I do believe in data. Yeah, I think data is important. We have to be careful with data, though. It's who's programming, because you can get a lot of programming bias. It's also data protection, right, and privacy. So how are we making sure we're truly anonymizing the data to protect people's privacy? There's lots of things you can look into with IoT, Internet of Things, around food, cold chain tracking, which I think is great because it's interesting. I went to a farm because I do a lot with farms in the area. They're organic, no-till, and help those on the spectrum learn how to grow and cultivate. And I went to a farm upstate to do a listening tour, and it was a young guy that was the son of these farmers, and he had connected up everything because he had worked as an internship at Cisco, ironically. I didn't know him through Cisco. And he did all IoT, and he said we only use the exact amount of water that we need. We don't overwater, underwater, because he'd connect everything up. So there's lots of ways you can use data to understand and respect our resources a little bit better. So there's also the Carolina Farm Trust that's Zach's doing an incredible amount of work. If you look at that online, the Carolina Farm Trust in North Carolina, they're buying up land and they're using data to really understand how to grow food very intelligently. And the other thing too is not monocropping. I'm a big fan of, and not telling communities to grow cashews when BAM nuts are what regenerate the soil and what they've been growing for their community for hundreds of years. For example, in Africa with what Chris is doing with What If Foods. But again, you have to be careful with too much data, right? And getting the wrong message. I like as well too what some larger, there's the GRACE satellite that's tracking water around the earth because we're damming all over the place, and that's causing the lack of the flow of water, which is really needed for the planet for many reasons. Yeah, I go back and forth, there's very earthy faith and there's technology faith. I'm a little bit of that communal, I guess, person. Because I think that we can use tech for good, but we have to be very mindful about the communities, where it's made, how we're implementing it, how it will impact the community and the environment there. But I'm a big fan of getting the right data so that we can show what's going on in the world, and especially a big fan of these new data tracking around people who are using the local aquifers which grow deep and wide, and then just using it for that parcel of land. And then so thus no one else, like in California or Arizona, has any more water left because they're growing soybeans, only. It's really interesting if you look at satellites and that data. If you look at satellites and food of what's being grown where, you see a problem. And so, yeah, but I'm big on data and tracking with food. Absolutely.
Thank you, Faith. Vincenzo, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. This is a little bit more a provocative question for you too. Actually, well, maybe for a little bit more for Faith, because you were talking about upcycling and is this movement, circular economy, a little bit as an alibi to push more consumption, because the people feel that now we have a solution that we can recycle, upcycle, so we are clean, basically. While I would say that maybe the solution is on the causes rather than just to cure the disease. And that's why I ask, maybe it's a wrong approach, this one, just to, yeah, it can save the situation, the current situation, try to fix the symptoms, but how to really avoid the waste. Tino, that's why I told maybe it's concerned more you, Faith, than Tino, because Tino approach is to avoid altogether the production of waste. So more durable, furniture.
Thank you.
But I think that's education has a role here.
Thank you so much.
I
Faith,
agree.
and
And
Tino?
yeah, I definitely agree, Vincenzo. It's I'm of the 7 R's: reject first. And I'm trying to figure out ways, like, it was really interesting. I had a conversation with the head of sustainability at this large luxury retailer in Ireland. And there were all these take back programs. And the reward was, if you give us your stuff back so that we can sell it on the secondhand sites, we will give you a coupon to buy more stuff. And we were all sitting there saying, ooh, that's not the purpose. So I said, well, what happens if we switched it, right? We switched, let's change malls, let's change retail to more experience economy, right? Like getting outside and mountain biking, like Tino said, right? So could you reward in an interconnected loop with something that's not buying another physical product, but enjoying maybe a ski pass instead? And the ski people need to find new customers to invite to their mountains, right? And enjoy the outdoors. And that would benefit that business as well. So it's just really changing our economy and changing. I'm a big fan of the experience economy and figuring out how the circular economy can fit into that experience economy. And so we consume less. The best thing we can do is consume less and enjoy our families and our friendships and nature instead of things, and not do recreational shopping.
Thank you, Tino.
Yeah, the experience economy is something really near and dear to what we're doing at Baru, especially as we allow people to design their own products in augmented reality. But also, the idea of returning manufacturing or economic ecosystems back to the village, it allows for a lot more flexibility. Not only are we're not just producing high quality luxury furnishings right now, but over time we'll be able to also tap into rentals, because the college student, all of the college students in Boston, they're buying IKEA furniture because they only need the furniture 9 months, and then afterwards it gets thrown away. Well, I can easily imagine making customized furniture directly for them at 6 times the value of IKEA, but we rent it for the year, and that includes all of the delivery and delivery and assembly services, and then at the end of the year it's reclaimed and reused, because it was made with a much more higher quality material. It can be recomponentized into the next year's student batch. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of business ideas coming up in this class. I think we're coming up by the end of the time, but I didn't want it to let the comments made by Mary about the experience economy and the Passeport Loisir. I don't know if you want to say a word about this.
I think that was for you, Mary.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the question. What was it?
Sorry, I was wondering, before closing, if you wanted to maybe elaborate a little bit on the comment that you did on Passeport Loisir.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was nice what Faith said, and I'm aware of a book here. It's called Passeport Loisir, and the idea is that you buy one time this book, and then you have 50% discount on your whole family to go to a Ban Thermal or to go skiing in some places, or some activities with children mostly. And I thought that this kind of offer, which already exists, could be combined with what she's saying. It requires collaboration from different companies that are not really connected typically. So I don't know how to connect them. Of course, it requires sort of by chance, this kind of coincidence, almost the fact that people know each other, maybe to come up with those ideas. But I like the idea, and as an answer to what Vincenzo said, it could be a nice way to offer something else and to work with those that offer something else, which in our case here in Switzerland is called Passeport Loisir. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this insight. So we're running out of time. I wanted to finish by thanking our two speakers. Thank you very much, Tino. Thank you very much, Faith, for taking the time for sharing those insights with us. It was very interesting. Congrats. And I hope that it was interesting for the students being with us. Yes, we're asking if everyone could just turn on the cameras so that we could see a little bit who was here. Thank you so much. So we can have a little grasp of the people that were with us. This is great. And I think we're going to see a couple of you on November 28th for the workshop. And before leaving, I just want Julia, I have to hide so that you can see her. I just want to thank her. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna say hello.
Hi, everyone. Yes, and I will see you on the 28th. That will be with me in that session. So I'm looking forward to it. Now roll back out.
Great, thank you so much. So I wish you a very nice evening, a very nice day to our speakers. And thank you for being with us. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.